Story 1. The Vanishing Hitchhiker. It was a late summer night when Sarah and her brother, Max, decided to drive through the back roads of their hometown, seeking adventure on a spontaneous road trip. The dark highway stretched endlessly ahead, the kind of place where only the hum of tires on asphalt and the occasional rustling of trees filled the air. After hours of driving, Max suggested they pick up a hitchhiker they saw on the roadside. Sarah hesitated but agreed, as the figure looked harmless enough. The woman was dressed in an old-fashioned dress, her long, curly hair framed by the dim light. Her eyes were wide with desperation as she climbed into the back seat. She introduced herself as Clara and explained she had been stranded for hours waiting for a ride. The siblings chatted with her, but as the conversation wore on, Sarah began to feel a chill in the air, and Clara's silence grew eerie. Suddenly, Clara's voice broke the silence. "Stop the car, I need to get out now." Max slammed the brakes and the car screeched to a halt. But when they turned to speak to Clara, the back seat was empty. The door was still locked and there was no sign of her anywhere on the dark road. Shaken, they continued their journey. But the next morning they passed a small cemetery. To their horror, Clara's face was among the gravestones, smiling faintly in a photograph on a memorial. Her death had been reported decades ago. Story 2. The Last Ride. Riley had always wanted to visit the old amusement park on the outskirts of town. It had been abandoned for years, but rumors of ghostly happenings there had only sparked her curiosity more. One evening, she convinced her boyfriend Luke to drive out with her. The park was even creepier than she imagined. The Ferris wheel was rusted and the rides were falling apart. Yet there was an odd energy in the air, like the place was still alive with echoes of its past. As they wandered through the grounds, they came upon a dilapidated roller coaster. Despite its condition, Riley felt an overwhelming urge to ride it. Luke hesitated, but she begged, and eventually he gave in. They climbed into the decaying car, and with a loud creak, the ride jerked to life, starting its slow climb to the top. Halfway up, the car suddenly jolted, and the lights flickered. Riley heard a faint, disturbing whisper in her ear, but when she turned to Luke, his face was pale, his eyes wide with terror. "Did you hear that?" she asked. But Luke didn't answer. His gaze was fixed ahead, his hands gripping the safety bar tightly. The ride reached the top, and then it froze, the whole structure groaning. Riley looked around, and that's when she saw it. A shadowy figure standing at the bottom of the coaster, staring directly at her. It was tall, gaunt, with an unsettling grin stretched across its face. Before she could scream, the coaster car jerked forward, speeding down the track with unnatural force. Riley clung to the seat, but when it stopped abruptly at the end, she was alone. Luke was gone, no sign of him anywhere. The only thing left behind was a trail of blood leading off into the dark. The ride operator, who had mysteriously appeared, looked at her with a grin. "Your ride's over, dear. Now it's time for someone else to take his place." Story 3. The Midnight Turnoff. It had been a long day of driving for Jake and his girlfriend Emma. They were heading to a small town in the middle of nowhere for a weekend getaway, far from the hustle of the city. As they passed through winding roads lined with thick forests, the sun began to set, and the fading light made the scenery feel unsettlingly quiet. They were almost there when Jake noticed a sign for a shortcut to their destination, promising to save time. He suggested taking it, eager to reach the cabin before dark. Emma hesitated but agreed. The shortcut was a narrow, unpaved road, barely visible in the twilight. As they drove deeper into the woods, the trees grew denser, and the silence felt oppressive. The only sounds were the hum of the engine and the crunch of tires on gravel. After a while, they came across a strange old wooden bridge with no lights, barely wide enough for their car to pass through. They crossed it slowly, both feeling a growing unease. Just as they reached the other side, the car sputtered and the engine cut out. Jake tried restarting it, but it wouldn't budge. Emma, uneasy, suggested they walk to the nearest house for help. They made their way through the dark woods, but when they reached the edge of the forest, they saw something chilling. The bridge they had just crossed was now gone, replaced by a deep chasm. No bridge, no road. Panicked, Jake turned to Emma, only to find that she was gone, vanished into the night. Frantic, he searched the woods for hours but found nothing. When he finally made it back to the car, the engine roared to life as if it had never stalled. Driving back, he noticed something in the rearview mirror, a woman standing at the bridge. It was Emma, but she was staring at him with hollow eyes, as though she had never been with him at all.